I tell my clients this, it's about resilience. It's not about living in this state of paranoia. It's preparedness.
Welcome to P&L, Priorities and Lifestyle, with your host, Rob Schultz. Rob is the founder and president of Schultz Wealth. All opinions expressed by Rob and his guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of Schultz Wealth Limited. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for investment decisions. Please refer to our website for more information.
Welcome, everybody, to P&L, Priorities and Lifestyle. I'm your host, Rob Schultz. And every other week, we like to come at you with different great ideas about things we should be doing, not only in our businesses, but also in our personal lives, to be more successful. And to be more successful, we have to recognize that there are threats out there. And so today, I have Bill Roth on the show, and we're going to talk about some threats. Bill, welcome.
Rob, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be on the podcast.
Yeah, it's great to have you. Bill is a co-founder of Hard Target. What is that? Well, Hard Target, the way I understand it, and we'll be talking about it further, is a company that they founded because they want to be able to help primarily families, but high-profile families a lot of times, deal with the threats of cybersecurity. Did I explain that okay?
Yeah, I would say that cybersecurity is the answer. The threat, or maybe the breaches and the cyber threats that exist out there. But yeah, that's a great summation of what we do. I can elaborate on that if you'd like. Yeah, we work primarily with high net worth families, affluent families, a lot of pro athletes, entrepreneurs, people that have done very well, what they call the ultra high net worth. So those are families that have assets of 30 million and up, excuse me. And yeah, we do some very unique things in the space.
Yeah, that's what I understand. And this has come up recently in the news because there have been, you mentioned high profile athletes. I think most of us are aware that, there was kind of some gang related type robbery events that occurred for several high profile athletes, not only in the Dallas area, but across the country, that come to find out, from my understanding at least, they were basically capturing data off online about these athletes and when they were going to be out of town for games, and were able to infiltrate their security systems and so forth, and use a lot of technology to be able to basically rob them physically. Is that kind of what happened?
Yeah, each scenario is a little bit different, but the big one that I think gets the most headlines, maybe Joe Burrow, because of the pictures that came out of the jewelry and the cash, and I think they made off with about $300,000 worth of his assets. And that's exactly how it oftentimes happens, where most of us have, all of us really have data out there on the web, and a lot of us don't realize how much actually exists about us, our home addresses, our phone numbers, those things. Some of us kind of assume that if you Google your name, you put your name in quotes in the city you live in. If you're in the data broker websites, it'll pull right up to peoplefinder.com or mylife.com if you've ever done that. But it goes well beyond that. There are literally thousands of data brokers, and that's a big part of where we start with our clients and in our own lives as well. But with clients that are affluent and high profile, like NFL players, we want to help them hide better. That's first and foremost. And so these situations where these athletes, and sometimes the cat's out of the bag, the address is out there, it's been out there for a while. Sometimes the address can, even if they've done everything, they put the property in an LLC, the address can still get out there through a county website if there's an approval needed, by some commission or something. And we've seen that recently with an architect that uploaded the name of the client, and it's just one little thing that got out there. I call it the DWICT. If you ever watch The Office, Dwight Schrute had this document where, or Michael Scott had this document of a story, and there was a little thing that caught them in the end. And so that's kind of a funny example of the data that can get all of us. But yeah, we start by hiding the client as well as we can, and then there are other neat things we do beyond that.
Well, so one of the things that I know when I talk about this with friends or whatever, about the information that's out there, for instance, sometimes there's just the assumption, and I have to admit, I kind of assume that the bad guys have a lot of this information, and I assume that they have it, so therefore I have to be vigilant, okay, and that there's, like you said, once the cat is out of the bag, so to speak, and they have this information, well, it's important for me to be vigilant, make sure that, I'm checking my credit card statements and things like that, and that I'm making sure that that the bad guys aren't getting into, I guess, the secure parts of my life, for instance, my bank accounts and things like that. But Bill, you're kind of saying that one of the places where you start, you mentioned the data brokers, obviously that make a living by capturing this information so that they can market to people. But you kind of start with maybe trying to minimize what data is actually out there, or even take other strategies, I guess, to get it back. Is that right?
Yeah. So they were data brokers kind of operate in this gray area of business where they're out there constantly scraping public and private, even private, repositories for our data and creating profiles on us. And like I said, there are hundreds of them that you and I could go find right now, and there are literally thousands more that nobody ever really realizes are out there. So,
but these are leak. Yeah. These guys, when they collect, they're not really doing anything illegal per se. Is that right?
No, they're not doing anything illegal. It is. We feel it's really kind of a gray area business anymore because of how much is gathered. The problem is that the web it really exists in 3 layers. So you've got the top 4% is the public web. That's what we think when we hear web. That's Google, that's Facebook, that's social media, that's news sites, Wikipedia. All that's on the surface web. That's only 4% of the web, right? And the lion's share of the web is 90%. And we have a great graphic on our website.
I've seen it.
People want to check that out. We just updated it. I'm super excited about it. But the 90% in the middle is the deep web. And that is anything behind a paywall or a login. So that's going to include, those county websites I mentioned a minute ago, as well as all the data brokers. It's going to include medical records, legal records, all that stuff that we hope is secure. And that's when you hear about a data breach on the news, that's what's being stolen, is the data from that 90%. And that data is worth, trillions. Who knows who's to say?
Okay.
And that then gets stolen. Through a variety of different ways, they'll steal that data and then repackage that and sell it on the dark web, which is 6%. And you don't want to go there. You have to access it through special browsers, and it's a place no normal person needs to go, wants to go. And so that data, all those profiles on us, is finding its way down in the dark web. And so that's a big problem for all of us, because there are huge breaches now. You'll hear of 2 to 3 billion records were stolen last summer, and that's detailed profiles on all of us: social security numbers, home addresses, phone numbers, enough to steal our identities. So now there's hundreds of millions of people that are caught up into that, and most people think, well, I'm not that important, so I don't need to worry about it that much. But the reality is that most people getting scammed, or most fraud, is happening to normal people. Now, we work with high net worth families. They're increasingly becoming targeted because of the resources that they have at their disposal, and the fact that oftentimes they have the liquidity of a large corporation without any of the security. So, and the bad actors have caught on to this and have started actively profiling, surveilling these families, and then targeting them in what are called, spear phishing and whaling attacks. Spear phishing is when you have, a targeted attack on somebody that might be in that family or in the sphere of that family to get at a family member. Whaling is when you come right at that person to try to extort them or something. So there's 1,000 different ways, as for this to happen. A lot of it happens through what's called social engineering. 90 to 98%, depending on which stat you reference, is coming through cyber digital manipulation.
So what you mean, let me guess what that means. So that means basically you think you're talking to one person or having a conversation, but really it's something totally different. Is that kind of what that means?
That's one of the forms where there's a deep fake, voicing, or even video is becoming more common. I think voice is probably more problematic for most things now.
Yeah.
But video is going to become increasingly so, especially for high profile, high net worth folks like who we work with. So, but it also includes, there are dozens of different types of social engineering, baiting, tailgating, piggybacking, spoofing, account takeovers, man in the middle attacks. All these things can be a bit bewildering to most people.
I'm bewildered, I'll have to say.
Right. And I throw it out there, like in this sort of a stream of consciousness, because there's so much to it that most people don't realize. They think, well, it's just phishing. Just don't click on the thing you get a text for, or don't click on the email and you're safe. That's part of it. But there's so many other more sophisticated attacks now happening that look real, that feel real. And that's the whole thing. That's what social engineering is, manipulating people by giving them incentive or prompting them to do something that they feel is in their best interest. So, like I said, there are hundreds of different strategies or tactics that these cyber criminals are now employing, and they're testing. So a lot of this is happening in Southeast Asia. There's huge cyber gangs and also in Russia as well. But they're testing all these things on, we'll say, normal people to see what works, and then they'll go execute a very detailed campaign on those who have a much more wealth, so that there's a big windfall at the end. So it's challenging, and I think being aware of this is not enough. You have to have some new cyber street smarts. This is what we tell our clients and everybody, really, not just people with wealth. If you have 10 grand, to your name, you're still a target, because someone on the other side of the world is going to try to get maybe 600, 700, 800 out of you. And that's going to be painful for you regardless, because of the intrusion nature of it, the loss of security.
So I guess one of the main things that we have to come to grips with, it sounds like, in visiting with you, Bill, is we have to understand that there are people that want to do us harm.
Absolutely. Yeah. The problem is metastasizing right now. I mentioned Southeast Asia. So there are company towns. You remember that old term, the company town back, in the States here? One company would basically employ everybody in a small town. There'll be 6,000 people. There are company cyber towns in Myanmar and other parts of Southeast Asia. Myanmar is a big one because of the political leeways they get there, and it's organized crime, right? So, but these entire towns are run by kingpins who are in bed with the local police, who are in bed with the government, and they are entrapping people. They're bringing people under the guise of a legitimate job from as far away as Nigeria, but a lot of times just over the border from China. And these people think they're getting a call center job, and they're being brought into this, literally cyber slavery is what it's called. You can go on YouTube and find some good documentaries out there about it now. But so that's we'll say, top of the funnel of the problem. You have tens of thousands of people that are now caught up in this, being forced, living behind 20-foot cinder block walls to target us, all of us, not just the wealthy, but anybody that has a little bit of money to, and in some cases, steal everything somebody's got. And that's another just tragic thing that's happening. It's called pig butchering. And the romance scams, and those go hand in hand.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So people they will clean them out. They'll find some lonely guy who's got a few $100,000 that he's saved his whole life for, or maybe he's divorced and he's looking for someone, and they'll pose and present as someone. They'll have real people on site to talk to him like they're the girl, they're the young woman that he's developed this relationship with, and they will get this person down to a place where they just take everything he owns. And it's, like I said, it's tragic. It's a downer. So, we take a way more upbeat approach to all this. We make a game out of training to thwart it, because it is such a tough thing, a topic that most people want to just avoid unless it happens to them. But I like games, and I like seeing the game of life and seeing, how can I turn something that's hard or difficult to do into a game. That's what sport is, if you think about it, right? It's playing a game so you can do something hard. Even athletics, I was a swimmer, so things like that, the clock is my adversary, like I'm racing the clock most times in the pool. So if you can turn a hard thing into a game, you can make it much more tenable. You can develop new instincts and new mental models. What Charlie Munger, great investor partner of Warren Buffett, would call a mental model. And that's what we do. We take all this, the cyber noise, and make sense of it. We simplify it, break it down into a tabletop war game that our families play together as families.
Interesting. So it's a game that I guess it's online somehow, I would assume, or
part of it is the games, the retreats that we do are in home, with families, and as many generations of the family, because I have a number of great graphics that sort of showcase, how these things happen. But if you just think of a family tree, right? You've got mom and dad, they've got 3 kids, 2 of those 3 have spouses, those families have maybe 2 or 3 grandkids. So that's called a genogram in the world of family offices, in the world that we work. And we take that approach because oftentimes they're trying to get to whoever has their hands on the purse strings, but they won't come directly at that person. They'll come through a more vulnerable person. So
that's that spearheading, right?
Spearfishing. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So the spearfish, someone that's even in the orbit, that could be an advisor, a wealth advisor, a cyber guy. Like, think of that, the irony. That's why we have to live the way we live, as hard targets. But that's also, chefs, private chefs, drivers, groundskeepers, landscapers. Anybody that can have physical access to a property is someone that needs to be prepared to and train at some level, or there's some awareness that needs to come. But our primary focus is on training the families, and we do that almost like the old school family game night. But it's a designed experience, food and music, and it's pretty remarkable what we've put together. But by going into airplane mode and getting around the table, the brain kind of switches into this other learning mode. And that's how all these new concepts can start to really sink in, is through the experience of it, laughing with your family members. And we find that, the game itself helps foster better relationships, better communications. Just because a family has wealth doesn't mean that they don't communicate better. They're normal people just like us. They just have more zeros maybe behind their names. But so we take a very human approach to this. And there is a digital aspect to the game between our events. We'll do these quarterly with our families. And between those, there's other sort of game-based learnings to kind of, keep things fresh. But that's not the magic to what we do. The real secret, approach here, the exciting part of what we do is the interplay between family members with the war games. So,
yeah, that's very unique and sounds really cool. Now, the other thing y'all are doing is kind of behind the scenes, probably cleaning up different things, finding out where there's information that needs to be dealt with, stuff like that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it's very systematized approach. The first phase is cleaning up the data, and and we have a suite of services we call the footprint suite, because we all have a digital footprint. And so we start there. We see what's on the dark and the dark web on our clients, and the deep web, I was just going to say, and start to claw that back as much as we can. So a lot of it's just level setting and seeing where this person's footprint exists right now, where do we want to get them, and how much of that can we start to pull back. We can do a lot in the way of the data brokers and getting names and details off of those sites, because by law they have to remove it, but it's also a very manual process. So we do all that for our clients. Once we get it sort of that lay of the land, then we switch into this gameplay approach to, which is phase 2, and that's our mindset suite. We're really trying to instill a hard target mindset into every member of the family to start to walk and think, okay, I just need to be more specific, or I guess deliberate about how I live my life and walk more circumspectly. And let's do that as a family. And so coming out of that, then we harden the devices, phones, laptops. We're doing this all in-house. That's IoT devices. That's everything that the family, is somewhat connected to. And so there's a process to all that. And we have what we'll call a hard target tech stack. So we use best in class technologies to augment what they might not have. But a lot of it's setting up things like password managers and two-factor authentication.
Sure, yeah.
All the best practices. Most people see like a cyber thing come through on LinkedIn and go, oh, yeah, I know I need to do that, but who has the time? So we really slow our client families down, and we all make the time. So it's done, right? It's not a one and done, but it's largely done. And then out of that, the third phase is governance, which is just, another way of saying, this is the agreed plan. This is how the family's going to move forward. These are all of our documented agreements for how we're going to live our lives digitally. If we travel overseas, on a safari, these are our do's and don'ts. We're not going to signal, on Instagram that we're out of town so that someone knows our home in Aspen is empty, things like that. So, but there's so many of those different scenarios. So that's why it's documented, and it's, sort of this living document for governance. So those are the big three things. And there are subsets to each one, but that's kind of the big picture of the service and the approach that we take with it.
Okay. So as far as, data and information that can be dangerous, that ends up in the dark web, I think you mentioned some of them. You preferably you don't want, your email address to be associated with your address, with, your name, your date of birth, social security number, all that PII information, as we call it. Is that the kind of the main thing that you're trying to clean up? What kind of data? Because for a lot of the time, I haven't worried as much about like who knows what my address is and stuff like that. So I'm just trying to get an idea about how vigilant we really need to be. And I'm thinking that the risk is when they can cross-reference and build a full profile of you, through all this information. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you have to ask yourself, what is the point of my address being on a data broker website? They're monetizing me, right?
Well, and it's the cell phone number is a problem, right?
Right. So you're getting all these random texts, and you're wondering, man, I got another one. Or you're getting these calls from random area codes, and all those, you can just ignore them, but you can get dozens of those a day if you're in the wrong databases. So by just going, well, why be out there? Why have my personal data? Now, a lot of our clients are high profile, meaning they need to be on social media to make a living themselves. They might be worth $100 million, but they have a machine, right? They have PR and publicists. And so we have to strike that balance, all of us, in how much we actually share. Most of us overshare on social media. It's literally trained a generation of us, billions of people, to tell people where they are, to signal what their interests are. And everybody kind of knows that Facebook has huge profiles on all of us because they use that for targeted ads, right?
Yeah.
Well, now that all that stuff is out there, the bad actors are getting savvier about how to make use of it, how to monetize it, how to come at people when they're completely unawares. So this isn't just something for the wealthy. As I said, most of the attacks that happen are normal people that just got blindsided, and they lost an amount of money they couldn't afford to lose.
Sure.
So I'm passionate about this, not just for my clients, but for everybody, because I see the saddest stories are people who lost their life savings. My clients can absorb, huge losses. Most that would be lifetime's earnings for most people. But believe it or not, it's not so much the loss of, money to them. It's a loss of that sense of security that the world's still a good place. It's just sort of like, man, I had no idea they would use my teenage daughter to come at me like this in the middle of a workday. This is evil. And so a lot of what we fight is that sort of the subversion that people don't realize it until they're caught up in it. And I call it going off the cyber cliff. Everything's fine one day, right? And then boom, you go off the cliff. They got you. And they've thought it 5 steps ahead. They're playing 3D chess, and most of our clients are playing digital checkers. And they're now selling you a $500,000, $2 million parachute as you go off that cliff, and promising not to shoot holes in it. I'm mixing my metaphors a little bit, but the challenge is that once you go off that, it's weeks, if not months, of heartache and headaches. And years ago, the big deal was, well, my identity was stolen. That's still problematic, but there's so much more that can happen now than just our identities getting stolen. Things can come at us in a very personal way. So, yeah.
All right. So obviously, we talked about, hey, probably not a good idea to share on social media that you're out of town, so somebody can break into your house. Okay, we got that. What are some of the other things that we just overshare that we just flat out shouldn't talk about?
Well, I think anytime you travel,
okay,
if you're doing an extended trip, maybe not signal, okay, we're in Dubai for 3 weeks, and I think a lot of people do that because we want to share. There's some flexing there, obviously. A lot of people want to just like, this is my great life, and it motivates a lot of people to do those sort of things. But you just put a big target on your back. Hey, I've done well. I've got money. Same thing with assets, cars. I mean, just think about anything that's somewhat ostentatious, and I just question it. We don't have hard and fast rules. We don't dictate to our clients, don't do this. We just say, look, if you want to be a much smaller target, because they will move on to easier marks. So that's the good thing.
I got you.
You don't have to live at a level 10. You can get to a level 5 and be comfortable. But it's sort of like musical chairs. You don't want to be the last one standing when the music stops. When they are deciding which targets they're going to go after, who's the low-hanging fruit, who do we have easy access to, who could we kind of zero in through an operating company and get to, that's where you have to ask yourself, what am I getting out of this? I get maybe 50 likes, okay? But I've just completely exposed myself.
Yeah, and I would think, probably relating from a family standpoint, who's who, like even names and things like that, you probably would want to avoid, I guess, to be just kind of out there for anybody to be able to see.
It's a great point, Rob, because especially children.
Yeah.
There's a great video out there, and we can put it in the show notes of sort of this future story of this young girl, an AI version of her talking. She's like, in real life, she's 4, but this video is showing these parents, she's 18 now, and all their oversharing and what it's now cost her.
Yeah.
And it's dramatic and a bit frightening, honestly. But
wow.
I think it's a great wake-up call for those of us who care about our children and their identities, and we don't want to have their social security number used for a loan in 5 states away or something. So all those things. I think the other thing is just there's so many predatory people out there. If you have children, just think about all the trafficking and stuff that is real. Ask yourself, okay, or just lock it down, lock your account, make it private, make it just between you and your family members on Facebook or Instagram or whatever it is. You don't have to have everything out there in the broader sphere for everybody to view.
Man, that's just starting to make more and more sense to me. I think I told you when we were talking a few weeks ago that my daughter has she has decided that with her kids who are young that we just don't do social media at all with regard to any of that. And at first I was kind of like, well, that's kind of different and weird. And then I started thinking about it from the context of what you just discussed, which just absolutely gives me chills and scares me to death. But then also just from the context of, they didn't authorize that, these little kids, right?
We do it for our own self grandeur, right? Look at me and my family, and aren't we great?
I'm totally on board with it now. And and we're able to share great moments and pictures and things like that, privately with each other, but we don't put it out there. And I have to admit, like most of extended family and friends, they don't understand or get that. But unfortunately, I think that we're all going to start getting it more and more, because this is obviously something that's not going away.
No, it's only going to accelerate for two reasons: artificial intelligence and quantum computing. So that is going to accelerate this beyond anybody's comprehension, really, because especially when you get into quantum computing, the sheer size and power and the capabilities of all that infrastructure that's coming. None of us can stop that. It's being invested in by everybody right now. They're building the future, and if your data is still out there, just willy-nilly, you haven't done anything to lock it down, you're really leaving yourself wide open. Your family, your loved ones, just completely exposed. I'm trying not to, fearmonger about this, but the AI is getting so good. The video looks real. They're doing these things as jokes about celebrities now. Just think about what 15 years ago things are like. Think about a joke about a celebrity and how much more it is today. Just how fast everything's gotten, how real it looks. We're talking 8K, level detail on things. And they can create that and make it look and sound like you now. So all you have to do sometimes is, the detectives always, they have to think like the criminal to catch them. In a lot of ways, we have to think sort of worst case scenarios so that we can game plan against it. Not just my team, but I think all of us, we have to just not walk in the world in this fearful way. I tell my clients it's about, I guess, resilience. It's not about living in this state of paranoia. It's preparedness.
Yeah.
So
I appreciate that. And I think that's important. There's two sides of this, right? It's, life is wonderful, right? But there are people out there that want to do us harm. You just have to recognize both sides of that, I guess, and deal with it appropriately.
Yeah, and that people are now capable of watching us. They're capable of watching you, and that's what, back to the NFL players, Joe Burrow, they're watching. His schedule is posted and will indefinitely be posted as long as he's a player.
Sure.
People will know he's on the road. He's at a game in Denver. I'm a Bronco fan. And that home in Cincinnati could be vulnerable. Now it's probably going to have a lot more security given what's going on. But I think that's one reason why we're growing so quickly among pro athletes is these things have now happened. The things we warned about are no longer theory. When it's one of these things, until it happens to you, you kind of ignore it. And I used to have that perspective until something kind of switched it up for me. And I realized, no, I need to take more care here.
Yeah. Well, Bill, let's take a quick break and then we'll be back. Whether it was one generation ago or 7, more than likely as an American, an ancestor of yours took an extreme level of risk in order to create a better way of life for themselves, their family, and eventually you. Most families have a story to tell, at least one story. My family ended up here in Texas when their wagon broke down in Del Rio. The wagon train they were a part of continued westward only to be completely massacred. I'm Rob Schultz, founder of Schultz Wealth. Our clients are entrepreneurs and business owners, the beneficiaries and true torchbearers of our American pioneer legacy. Our clients are not afraid of change. They are hopeful about the future, and they create wealth for themselves, their people, in this country through innovation, creativity, and hard work. Our job at Schultz Wealth is to help make sure it counts for something. If you're a successful business owner, let Schultz Wealth help you to the next level and beyond. All right, we're back. I got to tell you, Bill, a lot of that was a real downer for me.
I get it.
But it's so necessary for us to just recognize these things. And, the same thing happens, I guess, when our clients invest in the markets and so forth. The stock market is a great place to build wealth, obviously. But at the same time, it can be really hard. It can have pieces to it that are really challenging and stressful. And, the trick, I guess, is to understand the long game and be able to withstand, the volatility and the things like that, with the understanding that it's all going to be okay. You just you do what you're supposed to do, and it's all going to be okay. So it seems to me that getting to know more of this information is so important for all of us, so that, like you said, I loved what you said. We don't have to be a 9 or a 10. You just gotta make yourself a hard, not an easy target, just a hard target, not the hardest target, right?
Yeah, just a little bit better. And you think about it, maybe in terms of self-defense, right?
Yeah.
If you know a few things, as a man, right, you're walking down a major city, if you know how to sort of walk and not look like an easy mark.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Start there. They'll move on to easier, unfortunately, for those people. But that's just the world we live in, and thinking, okay, to some degree, I don't want to be paranoid, but to some degree, I just need to be aware. I need to know what I would do in this situation. I need to get some of my own personal stuff back from people who have no business using it, owning it, monetizing it, because it's mine. That's my information. So that's where it all started for me. I was just upset. This was during first year of COVID, and we're all kind of stuck at home, and I'm Googling myself. I had an exit, and I just had a lot of time, and I went down that road of privacy, and I was just blown away by how much was out there about myself, my wife, and how exposed we are as a family. And my dad was a United States Marine, and he taught me at an early age, you go into a restaurant, you always sit in the corner, you have your back to the wall, be able to gauge the exits and know your surroundings so that you're not the one caught off guard. So it's just a little thing. It's just a small request to the hostess. Can I sit in that booth?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But back to the self-defense thing, if you know just a few things, a few moves, whatever you want to study. I did Krav Maga because of its real world utility. So we're kind of the cyber martial arts or mixed martial arts class, if you will, for our clients. But yeah, this is, it's been a long journey as an entrepreneur. And I know the audience is a lot of other business owners who, I can relate to, because I've been at this for a long time.
Yeah. And I know you have. And from a business standpoint, obviously we need to take cybersecurity very seriously as well. And, people ask me sometimes, it's like, so, what do you feel like, your threats? What keeps you up at night as a business owner? And not a lot does. I've been very fortunate. Our business is it's just a really, really great little company. It's been really fun and exciting and successful. But there are two things that always concern me. One of them is, I guess you could say, compliance, or what you could call regulatory risk, because that stuff can change on a dime, and we're held to some standards that shift and are complicated, and there's just a lot of risk there, and we spend a lot of time there. And then one that's very, very related to it is cybersecurity. Those are the two that probably worry me the most. And again, I don't try to get, I don't just worry all the time about it. But
Right.
When I sit there and think about, okay, what do I need to be doing to protect my business? I'm generally going in those two directions. Like, what do I need to do to have a better compliance program? What do I need to do to have a better cybersecurity program? What do I need to do? And this is a big one. Some of my clients are listening. I'm going to throw them under the bus. I've always felt like that our biggest risk from a cybersecurity standpoint is through our clients. Okay. Because it's something I can't control. I can't control what they use as a password. If they decide to use the same password on everything, and some silly online thing that they were a part of gets hacked into, and now the bad guys are in their email, reading all the emails between me and my client, and they'll read all that, and then they'll find a way to try to capitalize on it, and that's the stuff that scares me as a business owner.
Yeah, I think those are for good reason, because it happens every day, and a lot of times the wealth advisor is targeted, or there's, like I used this term earlier, a man-in-the-middle attack, which is where somebody really kind of gets between you and the client, and they're posing as one or both of you.
Yes.
To move monies, usually, right, to do some kind of a wire transfer. And here's what we've seen. We've seen this is getting so sophisticated now, especially with those who have, we'll say, in north of 3 or 4 million, they have some money and they're investing it, they're doing something with it. They'll sit back and watch. I said surveillance earlier, so they'll watch for 4 or 5 months.
Oh yeah.
And maybe they've got, a key logger on the phone. They've figured how to get in, but they're not hitting you together, right? They're not hitting you at that moment. They're waiting for an opportune time. A planned wire transfer, for example. Oh, we're going to buy this rental property. Rob, can you help us with the wire? Right. That's the sort of event that they look for, because it feels native. It feels natural. It's part of the course of business. And it's those moments that you have to look out for and have good protocols, good systems in place to, call me, let's double check this, oftentimes.
Right.
But as we know now with deepfake voicing, even some of that, there needs to be stuff and steps beyond that now.
There are, the verbal is all obviously for years, been the way we make sure, as I've said a million times, in order for any money to leave your account, I have to hear your voice. Well, it can be faked now, so now, the protocol is that phone call has to be initiated from us, and to a number that we know is their number. But even, even that, they can be SIM swapped. Yeah, absolutely.
It's not the movies anymore. This is real life.
It is. And like you said, you just try to have the best protocols you can, try to stay ahead as far as you can, and, not just get frozen in the decision. Obviously, business has to be able to continue. Families have to, live their lives and so forth. But with the understanding that the stuff is real, you got to pay attention to it. You've got to be educated on it, and just be aware. There's no question. Yeah.
Well, it's not a want to, it's a have to at this point. But I think, the way that we do it, by making it fun, it becomes let's do that. That's, it's not going to be this heavy lift. like it used to be. Here, watch these 10 videos and let's talk. Like nobody wants to do that. So we turn it into an experience. Things that could work, for a wealth manager like yourself between clients is, maybe unique passphrases for each one that's unique to that client, and other, encrypted email systems and other things you may be already using.
Right.
But there's a lot of different strategies that can be employed. Again, just get to a 7, a level, that just makes you less attractive to a bad actor. There's a very, very small chance you'll be on the radar of the kind of threat actor that can do much to get around that. We've got a new graphic coming out. If you on LinkedIn, look for these. They'll be under #visual_cyber, but it shows the 5 tiers of different bad actors, different cyber criminals, from nation state at your level 5 to kind of your hacker next door, or, the people that are the 17-year-old kid in his mom's basement, just trying things because somebody, taught him a little this or that. So there are different types of threat levels. We don't have to live in constant state of fear. But that's why we work with who we work with. We've had clients targeted by Russian hacker groups.
Yeah.
In one case, this client owns an island out west. I won't say where. Can't even say much more than that. But they were whale fished by a Russian hacker group, targeted specifically. They thought they were safe on their island. You buy an island, you think, right?
Yeah.
But targeted, got into the family through a college-age son, and hit him for well into 6 figures. So it's real. It does happen. It won't happen to everybody at that level, but most of us will be dealing with people that are, like a level 1, level 2 kind of person that's poking around or is trying something fishy with us, sort of thing. So, but if you work in wealth management, I think you've got to be a bit more fortified than that, and which is why there's compliance for it. So
yeah, exactly. No, yeah, and we try to take it well beyond the requirements, because let's be honest, the federal government tends to be a step behind in a lot of this.
There's a lot of good people trying to do good things. We interface with the agencies, because if we, especially with high profile clients, if they're, and we just had this happen about, look at the date here, about 5 weeks ago, had a client at the White House and, subsequently death threats and things that come out on the dark web after something like that. So if it's material threat, then that gets escalated to the right agency, whether that's local or federal. So that's part of what we do for our clients. And, but it's rare, and we want to keep it that way. We want, instill this mindset in our client families and just build a growing community of people that are hardened as family enterprises. We call family enterprises, so they usually have an operating company beyond just the family. So
right.
But in wealth management, there's some cool things we're working on there that I think maybe you and I could talk about, because I think it could make this topic much more interesting for your clients to go, I hadn't thought about all this, but they're making it fun and easy. Let's shore up things here. Let's do a few things that they've made a no-brainer and made easy for us. So.
No, yeah. No, I'm obviously all ears on all that. I'm a sucker for cybersecurity ideas, for sure, man. It's important. It was interesting when we were talking about kind of how you got into this, where you just kind of looked and saw what all was everybody knew about you and your family and so forth after an exit, et cetera. So, kind of give us a little idea on your background. I think you've done a couple of successful exits. You've, as I like to joke, like a lot of the people that are watching this, sounds like you're pretty darn unemployable, Bill. That you've kind of worked for yourself. I call that unemployable.
Yeah. I do as well. Yeah, I don't make a good traditional employee in that sense, but for me, so back many years ago, did well in the .com era, but I was a kid, I was early 20s at the time, and
Yeah.
starting a family, and overpaid like a lot of people, right? We all had just got too much dumb money floating around, and I was kind of a hot shot, and thought a lot of my sales and biz dev skills, but I think it was just we were all riding that wave. And so when I got my pink slip with 400 other people on the same day, I was like, wow, I've got one in diapers and one on the way here in about a month and a half. What am I going to do? Because there were no jobs to be had, right? This was '01, and like spring of '01, I got laid off on Cinco de Mayo 2001. So I've been reading Rich Dad Poor Dad and some other books just about kind of the bigger picture of making money and creating wealth, and a track I thought I was on. I had some options like everybody did, and thought, well, okay, I'm going to do well in the tech, this whole thing. But hung out my shingle and started my first company, and then subsequently went broke for 2 years. And my wife went back to work. I wanted her to be a stay-at-home mom, and so we struggled. It took a solid 2 years to break through, and because I had a baby face, I looked really young, and people are, this guy wants to do marketing for us. I got tennis shoes that look older than this guy. So, but it took that couple years and landed an account, and went from 0 to 40,000 in about a month, and just never looked back after that, and grew that business for the next 10 years, there in Denver where I lived.
Nice.
And a company called Pervasive Marketing Group. So we did, that was web development, early days of mobile apps, and kind of rode that until I think the money kind of went out of web development after all that time, because all these great web builders came out, the DIY Squarespaces and Wixes of the world that make it so much easier now. So, but I saw the writing on the wall, and I pivoted out of that into the energy industry, because I was fascinated by that. And we had the fracking kind of was a big deal back in Colorado at that time in 2011. There were a lot of meetings, a lot of people having concerns because it was being done down the road. And so I went to my local meeting, and I just sort of watched how this public affairs guy with this local, it was a big company actually, but he was the government or public affairs guy, and just sort of was like, they're not communicating that well as a company. Like, they need more visuals. People are not getting it. Everybody's standing, getting to their feet, getting upset. And I'm like, maybe, as a visual marketing kind of person, like there's something there. And so that set me off for the next several years to build what became CH4 Media, which is the CH4 is methane. And at which I don't know, I like the name of that, and people thought it was Channel 4.
Yeah,
I had this business called Channel 4, but ended up building that for a few years until the Saudis repriced the barrel of oil in 2014, and started losing six-figure accounts. Like, you get an email and you're like, man, I just lost another six figures on this email.
Man, that cycle within the oil and gas business, there's nothing like it.
Nothing like it. And
it's crazy.
I didn't live it till I lived it. And and then all of a sudden I'm effectively, revenue was like darn near zero, and that's scary with the big family and all the responsibilities, and that whole unemployable thing, So but I pivoted. We were doing some good infographic type work, and we pivoted into another company called Investor Graphics, which did visual communications for investor relations departments of publicly traded companies. So went into Wall Street basically with this message of, hey, why don't we take your quarterlies or your annual report and make it much more visual, much more engaging, and it was the right time for that. Sweet spot, landed some big accounts, and did that for a few years. And along the way, I didn't mention, I built a health and fitness company in that first 10-year stint called Momentum, and kind of my little side hustle where I was the CMO of another company, and we had an exit from that to Weight Watchers in '08. So
nice.
I've always loved the human experience, but health and fitness, big part of my own life. So after I was also looking for another health and fitness idea, and that's when I started doing intermittent fasting. So fast forwarding back to 2017, 2018, and made a game. I said what I said earlier about doing hard things and making a game out of it. Well, I just old school here with my day planner. I still write things down, and I started just counting my hours, my fasted hours. So I put on like 30 pounds that I needed to lose. I just wasn't energy wise, didn't like how I looked, all that. But fasting started to work for me. But like anything, after a while, it gets a little rote and repetitive. So I just started counting my hours and just drawing these little blocks, just little rectangles, and then stacking them, and there were these little towers. And that was the genesis of gamified intermittent fasting app called Fast Hero, which raised some money and spent the next couple years building. And then that was the exit that I had during COVID, during the pandemic, where I took a year off. So I took a year off, and honestly, after 20 years of building a business, raising family, I needed a break, and I just took a sabbatical. I was in a position, thankfully, to do that. And we had moved to my dream home as a Midwesterner who dreamt of living in the mountains all my life, was to live in a log home. And we'd moved to a beautiful home overlooking the lake up here in Idaho, where we live, and live next door to an extraordinarily wealthy individual and an heiress to like a Forbes 50 fortune kind of level. And just sort of watched back to that, my dad's, U.S. Marine, operational security, seeing how people comport themselves and live their lives, going, man, if somebody knew what they were doing, they could really probably wreak havoc here. And we shared a driveway with this neighbor, so we got to know them a bit. So I felt like, well, maybe there's an opportunity, maybe there are other high net worth people who are in a similar situation where they're living like it's 1997, the world doesn't, there's just so much more that you got to be aware of now than that. And that was the genesis of Hard Target. And I had this idea of, well, what if it was a game? Like, I just gamified fasting.
Yeah, exactly.
That worked. Why not cyber?
Yeah, no kidding.
I know, and I'm looking at this is at the
fasting, cybersecurity.
Yeah. And I'm looking at my privacy and my own digital footprint, and I'm going, well, I need to do all this, but this is tedious. This is a lot. How do I do this? And spending gobs of hours. And I said, well, I'm going to make a game out of it, and we'll see what comes of that. And then that was the genesis of what is now Hard Target. But I knew if I was going to really make headway into the ultra high net worth space and family office world, that which I didn't have any contacts in. I didn't even know family offices were a thing until maybe a year and a half ago. So, and now count them, as a big part of our business model. But I knew I needed to find a real cyber pro, not just the weekender guy like me who's trying to quickly study all this, and started really looking around and kind of interviewing people to team up and to build a company with. And took about a year and a half before I was introduced through a family office to my now co-founder, Anwar Visram, who's in Vancouver, British Columbia, and really the foremost expert in working directly with high net worth families, being in the homes. He's been in the homes of Saudi sheiks and huge names you would recognize in this country, which I won't name drop, and everybody in between. And so, but he just has an incredible way of how he communicates. And I took a look at what he was doing, and so I think he might be the right person to team up with, just given his soft skills, his ability to communicate at this level of gravitas. And we've spent the last year and a half building Hard Target, and it's really starting to grow and take off. So that's the story. That's me from the 90s to about now. But that's what we do more of on this show than anything else, is hear those stories. That's great, Bill. What a cool story at that as well. So several different
I guess you could say you recreated yourself a multitude of different ways.
Yeah, that's what my
You really
family's always
did.
saying. Yeah.
I mean, it's very, very interesting. Yeah, so that's awesome, Bill. Thanks for
Thank
sharing
you.
all that. I think, yeah, I think kind of from here, what I always ask is, is there anything else that you can think of that we need to let the folks know about? You think we missed anything?
Well, I think most of my businesses have been some kind of a expression of who I am.
Yeah,
I really bake myself into what I do, and that's what fires me out of the bed, out of bed in the morning really early, and I tend to work long days right now, especially in this season of the business. It's not always like that. You can get to the point, like my first business, I got to the point where I did very, very well, working 20 hours a week, and it was largely passive with a great team. So we'd grown that to about 30 people, just shy of 30 people. So you can build systems and get it there, but I'd say challenge yourself on if the way that you're doing things looks like everybody else, and you're struggling and you're asking yourself why. I would start there, because I think most businesses are looking for insight. They're looking for someone who has a unique point of view, and oftentimes is taking a better, improved approach. It doesn't have to be 100% different than everything everyone else is doing, but it has to be different enough that you stand out. Otherwise, you just get caught in this deluge of content and noise, and you're part of it. And so I think that's, if there's one sort of tidbit I'd leave each listener with, is challenge yourself on how to reinvent what you're doing. And I've got, as you said, I have a lot of practice in the complete overhaul of built businesses in oil and gas and web development and energy and health and fitness, right? And now cyber. So each time I do that, I'm re-upping, and I'm having to learn a whole new body of evidence and a body of work to master that. But that's part of how I'm wired, which most people don't need to do everything that way. Maybe more serial entrepreneurs do it that way. But if you've done one thing for 15, 20 years and you're kind of plateauing, challenge yourself. There's good books about this. Look me up on LinkedIn. I don't know, for runners, I'm not thinking of the books that I'd recommend right now, but I can send those over. But be a student of business and think about, how am I going to level it up? How am I going to rework what I'm doing so that other people see me differently? Because that is, I think, the hook to faster growth. And now we're on a rocket ship, but it didn't happen by accident, right? It was a year of reinventing cyber to get to this point where now it looks like all this is just happened yesterday. Well, no, that's like 4,000 hours of work.
Yeah, but I really appreciate that, Bill. And it sounds like really kind of your superpower has been your ability to cut through the noise with, like you said, kind of a different perspective, a different way to communicate, what you have, like, this gamifying of something that is so scary and so boring in so many ways,
right? Yeah.
Is a new approach, and no question, a big part of your success. And congratulations on that, by the way. And really excited for y'all and all the success that you're having. It's fantastic.
Thank you, Rob, and likewise. And I think the book that I'd leave everybody with, it's by Peter Thiel, and it's I think it's The Power of One, or One. It's a blue book with one on the front of it, and that it's a paradigm shifting book. Even if you wrote a lot of business books, which I've got a library of, but I think it sort of confirmed for me, no, you have to go create a business of one. You have to do something that is remarkable to the degree that nobody can follow you. Another, related book is The Blue Ocean Strategy.
Right.
And so they're really kind of overlap, but I think they're nuanced in their differences and both worth reading. So that's the approach I've always taken. That's why I think I've lasted 25 years as a bootstrapping entrepreneur. And, I'm just a little shot that keeps on shooting, but I think that's something anybody can be if they just put the hammer down and think outside the box a bit.
Yeah. Just get creative.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So, Bill, if somebody wants to get in touch with you and maybe ask questions or discuss some of the stuff that we discussed further, what's the best way for them to get in contact with you?
LinkedIn's the only social platform really on anymore.
Same.
So that's I think that's great, and we could DM on there. Just reach out to me, say, hey, I heard you on the podcast. I do vet my those that reach out, so don't just send a request. Put a little note with it. Just say, hey, I heard you on the P&L podcast, and would love to connect, or something like that.
Yeah, that's perfect. LinkedIn is great, and if we're not, I'll make sure you and I are connected on LinkedIn as well, so that people can get there.
And we've got some really cool content on there that we did a series called Compromised. They're like little mini video, 4 or 5 minute vignettes about real cyber attacks that I'll send that to you as well. But those are real stories of cyber attacks on family offices and ultra high net worth. We're getting ready to roll out season 2. We launched season 1 last fall. And so that's an interesting thing, that back to being different. Nobody does anything like that, Yeah,
that's cool.
They're just short little narratives, and then this visual cyber thing I mentioned earlier, and another one that we're going to call Friday Fish Fry, and those are phishing texts that we're all getting, and it's just going to be basically a weekly rundown of all the crud that's coming through on our phones, just as like a heads up, and we're going to make fun of them, and it's going to be kind of a fun.
So when is that? When are you going to have that up and running?
That'll be early. Look at the calendar. Early April, maybe sooner. I just don't want to overpromise.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. I'm in on that. So I'm definitely gonna want to see that. That sounds like something that just to keep it aware.
Just be aware. Yeah. And then you can comment. Yeah, I got that one. We're gonna have a little way for you to send us, like, to screenshot the ones you're getting, so that that we're not. Yeah, so everybody can, as a community, we can just build a community around all this crap that's, pardon the language, that's coming our way, and be aware of it. And again, we're about making this topic fun and interesting. And I think it's a good way to do that. It's just, well, let's make fun of it. And then it'll stick in the mind. If people laugh, then you've got, kind of that emotional dendrite that connects to the content and the ideas.
Yeah, that's cool, Bill. Very
Thanks,
good.
Bob.
Well, I'll be watching for that. We'll put some details in the show notes about some of the LinkedIn stuff that you've got, so people can get to it. Folks, we really appreciate you being with us today. Very important topic. Hope you got something out of it. And if you want to reach out to Bill, please do so. Go find him on LinkedIn and some of the cool tools he has. If you know some great stories or just some important topics that we need to be aware of as business owners, do not hesitate to reach out to me and let me know. We try to put this out every other week, and we're trying to put something out that makes sense and makes your life better and makes us all more successful. Hope you have a great week. Take care.